Have you ever noticed how some people seem to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, even when they're still young? They're the ones who never really had a childhood, the ones who became adults before their time. Maybe you know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. Today we're going to explore the psychology of a child who grew up too fast. And by the end, you might understand yourself or someone you love in a completely different way. 1. They became the caretaker when they should have been taken care of. Somewhere along the way, the roles reversed. Maybe a parent was sick. Maybe there was financial struggle. Maybe there was emotional instability in the home, and this child stepped up. They learned to cook, they managed bills, they comforted their siblings or even their own parents. Psychologists call this parentification. It's when a child takes on adult responsibilities that don't belong to them. But here's what most people don't understand. They didn't do this because they wanted to be grown up. They did it because they had no choice. They did it to survive, to keep their family together. And even though they were praised for being so mature or so responsible, deep down, a part of them was screaming to just be a kid. 2. They learned to suppress their own needs. When you grow up too fast, you learn a painful lesson early. Your feelings come second. There's no time to cry when someone else needs you to be strong. There's no room to fall apart when you're holding everyone else together. So they became experts at hiding their pain. They learned to smile when they were breaking. They learned to say, "I'm fine," when they were drowning. This is called emotional suppression, and it becomes their default mode. As adults, they struggle to ask for help. They struggle to admit when they're overwhelmed, because somewhere, deep inside, they still believe that their needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. They've been trained to put themselves last. 3. They developed hyper-independence as a survival mechanism. If you grew up too fast, you learned one thing very clearly. You can only rely on yourself. Maybe the adults in your life were unpredictable. Maybe promises were broken. Maybe support wasn't there when you needed it most. So you stopped depending on anyone. You built walls. You became fiercely independent, not because you wanted to be alone, but because being let down hurt too much. Psychologists recognize this as avoidant attachment. It's a protective strategy. If you don't need anyone, no one can disappoint you. But here's the cost. Even when people want to help, even when they genuinely care, you push them away. Because accepting help feels like weakness. It feels like losing control. And that loneliness, it cuts deeper than most people realize. 4. They feel responsible for everyone's emotions. When you were forced to read the room as a child, when you had to manage other people's moods to keep the peace, something happens to your brain. You become hypervigilant. You start scanning every face for signs of anger, sadness, or disappointment. This is called emotional hyper-awareness, and it doesn't go away just because you're an adult now. You feel responsible when someone is upset, even if it has nothing to do with you. You apologize constantly. You try to fix problems that aren't yours to fix. Because as a child, you learned that other people's emotional stability was your job, and you've been carrying that burden ever since. But here's the truth. You were never supposed to manage anyone's emotions. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone's. That was too much to ask of a child, and it's still too much to ask of yourself. 5. They have an intense fear of being a burden. If you grew up too fast, you probably heard certain phrases over and over. "You're so mature for your age. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the strong one." And those words, they taught you that your value came from what you could do for others. So now, even as an adult, you'd rather suffer in silence than ask for help. You cancel plans when you're struggling. You hide your problems. You minimize your pain. Because somewhere, deep inside, you believe that needing support makes you weak, that having problems makes you a burden. This is a form of what psychologists call toxic independence. It's the belief that needing others is a failure, but the reality is this: being human means needing people. It's not a weakness. It's not a flaw. It's simply what connection looks like. 6. They struggle with guilt when they prioritize themselves. Here's something most people don't talk about. When you grow up too fast, self-care feels selfish. Resting feels wrong. Saying no feels cruel. Putting your needs first feels like betrayal, because your entire childhood was built on sacrifice, on giving, on being there for everyone else. So when you finally try to do something for yourself, the guilt is overwhelming. Psychologists call this caretaker guilt. It's the internalized belief that your worth is tied to how much you give, not to who you are. And it keeps you trapped in cycles of burnout, people-pleasing, and resentment. But here's what you need to hear. Taking care of yourself is not selfish. It's necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give what you don't have. And choosing yourself, even just sometimes, doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who's finally learning to heal. 7. They feel like they missed something they can never get back. There's a specific kind of grief that comes with growing up too fast. It's not loud, it's not obvious, but it's always there, lingering in the background. It's the grief of a childhood you never had, of innocence you lost too soon, of moments you can't go back and reclaim. You watch other people talk about carefree memories, and you realize you don't have many of those. You were too busy surviving, too busy being responsible, too busy being strong. This is called ambiguous loss. You're mourning something that was never fully there to begin with, and it's complicated because you can't mourn a childhood that people praised you for missing. You can't grieve something that others saw as maturity, but you're allowed to feel that loss. You're allowed to be angry about what was taken from you. You're allowed to wish things had been different, because they should have been. 8. They're learning to give themselves the childhood they never had. Here's the beautiful part, though. Here's the shift. You don't have to stay stuck in survival mode. You don't have to keep living like that child who had no choice, because now you do have a choice. You can choose to let people in. You can choose to rest without guilt. You can choose to play, to be silly, to do things just because they bring you joy. This is called reparenting. It's the process of giving yourself what you didn't receive as a child. It's buying yourself the toy you always wanted. It's letting yourself cry when you need to. It's asking for help even when it's hard. It's learning that you don't have to earn love by being useful, that you don't have to be strong all the time, that you're allowed to just be. And slowly, gently, you start to heal. You start to reclaim the parts of yourself you had to bury. You start to build the life you deserved all along. If you grew up too fast, I need you to hear this. You did nothing wrong. You survived something that no child should have to survive. And the fact that you're still here, still trying, still hoping, that's not just strength. That's extraordinary. But you don't have to keep carrying the weight alone. You don't have to keep proving your worth. You don't have to keep sacrificing yourself. It's time to let yourself rest, to let yourself receive, to let yourself be the person you needed when you were younger. You deserved a childhood. And even though you can't go back, you can still give yourself permission to heal, to play, to be light. The little kid inside you is still there, and they're waiting for you to finally let them breathe. If you love understanding why people think and behave the way they do, hit subscribe because we're just getting started.